Simone's shoes were already off before she realized the apartment wasn't hers. 16 hours. That was how long she had been on her feet. 16 hours of IV lines, call lights, one man who tried to discharge himself mid-surgery, and a patient who asked her, with complete sincerity, if she was one of those African-American nurses from the TV shows. Simone had smiled, fixed his IV, and whispered a very specific prayer under her breath that she would never repeat in church. So yes, she was tired. The kind of tired that makes your own name sound unfamiliar. The kind of tired that had apparently made her ride the elevator to the 7th floor instead of the 8th, push open an unlocked door she assumed she had left unlocked herself, drop her bag by the entrance, walk to the fridge, open it, and stand there staring into it for a full 10 seconds before something registered. This was not her food. Her fridge had leftover jollof rice from the Nigerian restaurant 2 blocks down. A mango she kept promising herself she would eat, and approximately 4 different types of hot sauce because Simone Washington from Chicago did not play about condiments. This fridge had neat stacked containers, dark glass bottles of something expensive, and absolutely zero personality. "This is not my fridge," she said out loud to no one. She turned around slowly. Same layout as her apartment, same building, wrong unit, and sitting in the armchair across the dark living room, completely still, watching her with eyes that gave absolutely nothing away, was a man. Simone did not scream. She was from Chicago. She grabbed the nearest object, a vase, heavy, cold, looked like it cost more than her monthly rent, and held it above her head with the full and genuine intention of using it. "Who are you?" she said, voice flat. "And why are you sitting in the dark like you're auditioning for a horror film?" The man didn't move, didn't speak. And then the light from the open fridge caught it, the dark, spreading stain on the left side of his shirt. Slow, wet, unmistakable. He was bleeding. Simone's grip on the vase loosened before her brain approved the decision. The nurse instinct, the one that had never once, not in 6 years, let her walk past a person in pain, stepped forward and took the wheel completely. "How bad is it?" she said. "Leave." His voice was low, controlled. The voice of a man who had spent a long time being obeyed without question. Simone set the vase down and crossed the room. "I need light, and whatever you have that passes for a first aid kit." I said leave, and I said I need light. She crouched beside the armchair and looked at the wound with the focused calm of someone who had seen far worse on a slow Tuesday afternoon. "You've lost significant blood. This needs to be cleaned and dressed right now, or you're going to have a much bigger problem than whatever got you here." She looked up at him. "Bathroom cabinet?" He looked at her for a long, measuring moment. The kind of look that probably made a lot of people step back. Simone did not step back. He pointed. "If you're new here, subscribe right now. This story is just getting started, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next." She worked quickly, cleaning, dressing, assessing. Steady hands, focused eyes, a running commentary under her breath about laceration depth and infection risk that she was pretty sure she wasn't saying out loud, but definitely was. He watched her face the entire time. Not her hands. Her face. Focused, unperformed, completely unbothered by his silence or his apartment, or the fact that it was 1 a.m. and she had walked into a stranger's home carrying a vase she'd been ready to swing. "I'm Simone," she said, tying off the bandage with a neat, practiced knot. "I live 1 floor up. Your door was unlocked." She paused. Which, by the way, is a terrible idea in general, but especially when you're bleeding in the dark, like a low-budget vampire. The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was something. "Tae-yang," he said. "Just Tae-yang for now." She nodded, like that was a perfectly reasonable, normal thing to say. Then she stood up, washed her hands in his kitchen sink, opened his fridge again, and started pulling things out. He stared at her back. "What are you doing? You lost blood. You need to eat." She turned, scanning the shelves. "Do you have eggs?" "I don't need. Do you have eggs, Tae-yang?" A pause. Then, quietly, he told her where the eggs were. They talked until sunrise. Not about the wound, not about how he got it or who gave it to him, or why he had been sitting alone bleeding in the dark instead of calling someone, anyone. She didn't push, and he didn't explain, and somehow the space around those two things filled up with everything else. She told him about Chicago, about growing up on the south side where her grandmother's house always smelled like cornbread and pine sol, about watching the nurses at the hospital where her grandmother spent 3 years, how they were the ones who showed up every single day, remembered her name, talked to her like she was still whole, even when the illness was taking pieces of her. "That was the moment I knew," Simone said. "I didn't want to be the doctor who came in for 10 minutes. I wanted to be the person who stayed." She told him about coming to Seoul on a 2-year contract that her mother had called a crisis, and her best friend Layla had called absolutely unhinged, but also very on-brand for you. She told him she'd been here 8 months and hadn't once woken up wishing she was somewhere else. He listened with the full, undivided attention of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to hear a person speak without an agenda behind every word. He asked careful questions, the kind that said more about him than her. What did she miss most about home? What surprised her most about this city? Did she ever regret staying? "Never," she said, "not once." She looked at him across the quiet kitchen, this strange and bleeding and unexpectedly present man. "Your turn. Tell me something true, not about business, not about whatever complicated thing got you stabbed tonight. Something real." He was quiet for a long moment. "I haven't slept properly in 4 years," he said. Like the words surprised him on the way out, like he hadn't planned to say them at all. Simone looked at him with the specific attention of someone who understood exactly what that kind of exhaustion cost. "What keeps you up?" "Everything," he said. "The weight of it." "Did you choose it? Whatever it is that's heavy, did you choose to carry it?" He held her gaze for a moment that stretched out long and quiet. "Once," he said, "a long time ago." "Would you choose it again?" He didn't answer, and somehow that was the most honest thing he had said all night. By 6 in the morning, Seoul was waking up outside, his windows. Simone stood, stretched her back with a groan that she decided she was not embarrassed about, and picked up her bag. "Change the dressing tonight," she said. "I left everything in your bathroom cabinet." She looked at him one more time, this silent, bleeding, unexpectedly honest stranger who had let her make him eggs and talked until the sky went from black to gray to gold. "And get a lock that actually works. You're a grown man sitting in the dark. It's giving haunted." "Thank you," he said. The words came out slightly unfamiliar, like a phrase he knew in theory but rarely practiced. She picked up her bag, then stopped at the door. "Whatever weight you're carrying, Tae-yang," she said quietly, "I hope it's worth 4 years of sleep." She left. He sat in the armchair for a long time after the door closed and felt something he had no name for. Like a room he had forgotten existed had been briefly, unexpectedly lit. He told himself he would not look for her. He found her within 48 hours. He told himself it was security. She had seen his wound. She knew his face. She was a variable that needed to be assessed and contained. He had his people run the background check before he even admitted to himself that he was going to use it for something other than threat assessment. Simone Washington, 29, registered nurse, Seoul International Hospital. Originally from Chicago's South Side, no known connections, no red flags, no risk. He should have left it there. Instead, he showed up at the hospital on her lunch break. She came through the staff entrance and found him leaning against a black car with the careful stillness of a man attempting casual for what might have been the first time in his adult life. She stopped walking, looked at him, then looked at the car, then back at him. "You changed the dressing," she said. "You told me to. I didn't expect you to come find me." "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Properly." Simone tilted her head. "You could have sent flowers." "I don't send flowers." "No?" She looked at him with that direct, uncomplicated attention he still had absolutely no defense against. "I didn't think so." She checked her watch. "I have 40 minutes. There's a bibimbap place around the corner. You can thank me over lunch. And before you say anything, yes, I'm going to order 2 portions because I had a patient try to bite me this morning and I deserve carbohydrates." Tae-Yang followed her. He kept following her for 2 weeks after that. Coffee near the hospital. A walk through Bukchon on her day off. She made him stop at every traditional house to take pictures while he stood beside her with the expression of a man trying very hard not to find this endearing and failing completely. A dinner where he arrived first was already seated when she walked in, and felt something shift in his chest simply from watching her cross a room toward him. He noticed he was looking for her in every room before she arrived. He noticed he was telling her things in the quiet dark of restaurants that he had never said out loud to anyone. Not his oldest associate. Not the few people in the world who knew his real name. And then Layla called. What Layla found. Simone's best friend had been quietly running her own investigation since the moment Simone mentioned a man named Tae-Yang, who had appeared in her life bleeding and mysterious, and apparently very hard to stop thinking about. Layla was a paralegal back in Chicago. She had a gift for research that she described as a blessing, and her ex-boyfriends described as terrifying. She called Simone on a Thursday evening, and the first thing she said was, "Sit down." "I'm already sitting." "Sit down harder." She read Simone 3 headlines. A criminal investigation piece from 2 years ago. A name, Han Tae-Yang, connected to the movement of significant money through untraceable channels across 6 Asian cities. A third piece that was vaguer, more carefully worded, but mentioned his name in connection with the kind of men whose problems had a way of becoming other people's problems. "Simone," Layla said, "this man is not just mysterious and fine. This man is dangerous." Simone sat with her phone in her hand for a long time after the call. Then she picked up her scrubs from the floor because she had been about to change when Layla called, and she noticed something she had missed the first time she looked at them. There was a photograph tucked into the pocket of her scrub top. Not her photograph. She had never seen it before. It was a small, printed image. A woman, late 40s, dark circles, a hospital bracelet visible on her wrist. On the back, in small, precise handwriting, Room 412, 3 months ago. Ask him why she never pressed charges. Simone stared at it. She knew that face. Room 412, 3 months ago, she had been on shift that night. The woman had come in alone at 2 in the morning with bruising, consistent with a fall that Simone had not believed for 1 second was a fall. She had tried, gently, 3 different times to ask the right questions. The woman had refused every opening. Discharged herself the next morning. Never came back. Simone had thought about her more than once since then. Someone had put this photograph in her pocket. Someone who knew where she worked, knew which locker was hers, and wanted her to start asking questions. Her hands were not shaking. She was from Chicago, but they wanted to. Don't go anywhere. Subscribe right now if you haven't already, because this story is about to change direction in a way you will not see coming. That evening, Tae-yang came to her door, the right door, 8th floor, with food from a restaurant she had mentioned exactly once, in passing 3 weeks ago. He had remembered. He always remembered. She let him in, set the food out, sat across from him. "Han Tae-yang," she said quietly. The room changed temperature. He looked at her steadily. "How long?" "A few hours." She placed the photograph on the table between them. "And I need you to look me in the eye and answer one question honestly. Not carefully, not strategically, honestly." He looked at the photograph. Something moved behind his eyes. Fast, controlled, gone before she could name it. But she had seen it. "Are you the kind of man I should be afraid of?" The silence was long and full. "By most definitions," he said, "yes." "By yours?" He didn't look away. "Never. Not you, never." "Then tell me about the woman in this photograph." Another silence. Longer this time. "She was involved with someone I was in business with," he said carefully. "Someone I ended a relationship with." Not cleanly, he was angry. She was collateral to that anger. He paused. "I found out 3 weeks after she was discharged. The man is no longer a problem." "No longer a problem," Simone repeated. "What does that mean, Tae-yang?" "It means he will never touch anyone again." Simone sat with that for a moment. She was a nurse. She had spent 6 years watching what happened to people when no one intervened in time. She had also spent her whole life being told that some situations were too complicated, too dangerous, too far above her pay grade to ask questions about. She had never once believed that. "Someone put this in my pocket," she said. "Someone who knows where I work and wanted me to ask you exactly this." "Who?" "I don't know yet." "But you have people who will find out." "Yes." She pushed his food towards him. "Then eat," she said, "and don't lie to me about anything. That is my only rule. Not one lie, Tae-yang. I don't care how complicated your life is. I have handled complicated. I am from Chicago's South Side. I once talked a man out of a standoff using nothing but patience and the promise of a good meal. I can handle complicated. I cannot handle dishonest." He looked at her across the table. This woman who had walked into the wrong apartment and grabbed a vase and made him eggs and asked him questions no one had thought to ask in 15 years. This woman who had just learned exactly who he was and was sitting here demanding honesty instead of walking out the door. "That," he said quietly, "is the one rule I can keep." 3 days later, Simone met his world for the first time. It was not planned. She had agreed to meet Tae-yang for coffee near Gyeongbokgung Palace. A normal civilian cup of coffee, she had specifically said. No black cars, no men in earpieces, just coffee. He had agreed. She had believed him. She had been naive. When she arrived, there was a man already sitting across from Tae-yang at the outdoor table. Sharp suit, expensive watch. The kind of smile that was assembled rather than felt. He stood when he saw her, extended his hand with the fluid confidence of someone who had never once been told no, and said in perfect English, "So, this is the Chicago nurse. I've heard a lot about you." Simone looked at Tae-yang. Tae-yang looked like a man quietly calculating an exit strategy. "Park Do-hyun," the man said. "Tae-yang and I are old associates, very old." He said it the way people say things they intend to be understood more than one way. "You know, it's funny. For a man who keeps no personal attachments, he has mentioned you 3 times this week. 3 times. I counted. Do-hyun. Ta-Yang's voice was a single word, and somehow also a warning, a wall, and a full stop. Park Do-hyun ignored it entirely. He turned to Simone with that assembled smile, leaned in slightly and said, "How much do you actually know about who you're spending your time with? Because I'd hate for a woman like you to be caught off guard. It would be such a waste." Simone looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she slapped him. Not a dramatic, both hands in the air slap. A clean, precise, flat-palmed slap. The kind that announced itself clearly and left no room for misinterpretation. The sound of it cut across the outdoor terrace like a punctuation mark. The table went silent. The nearby tables went silent. A woman 3 tables over put down her coffee cup. "I'm going to stop you right there," Simone said pleasantly, shaking out her hand. "Because I'm a nurse, so I know exactly how hard to hit someone without causing lasting damage, and I would like you to understand that what just happened was a professional courtesy. The next time you speak to me like I'm a prop in someone else's story, I will not be as precise." Park Do-hyun stared at her. His cheek was red. His composure, for the first time in what was probably a long time, was genuinely absent. Tae-yang was looking at Simone with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It took her a moment to identify it. It was admiration, pure, unguarded, and completely uncontrolled. Park Do-hyun straightened his jacket, looked at Tae-yang, then back at Simone. Then he did something no one at the table expected. He laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. "All right," he said, mostly to himself. He picked up his coffee, nodded once to Tae-yang, and left without another word. Simone sat down, pulled Tae-yang's untouched coffee toward herself since hers hadn't arrived yet, and took a long sip. "Who was that?" she said. "Someone I used to trust," Tae-yang said. He was still watching her with that expression. "Used to?" "As of approximately 45 seconds ago," he said. "Yes." Simone considered this. "He knows something about whoever put that photograph in my pocket." Tae-yang's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Then we're going to need to have a much longer conversation," she said. "But first, can I please just have one normal cup of coffee? I have been awake since 4 a.m., and I slapped a man before 9, which I feel deserves a reward." Tae-yang signaled the waiter. For the first time in a very long time, he did something else he had no framework for. He smiled. Fully. Without calculation. Without thinking about what it cost. That night, back in her apartment, Simone sat on her kitchen counter with a cup of tea and called Layla. "I slapped someone today," she said. "Was it the dangerous, mysterious man?" "No, it was his dangerous, mysterious associate." There was a long pause. "Simone, I know. You are a nurse in Seoul. You are supposed to be healing people, not getting into the organized crime cinematic universe. I know. Are you okay?" Simone looked out her kitchen window at the city. Seoul at night was extraordinary, all light and movement, and the sense of a million lives happening at once, loud and indifferent and relentless. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." She paused. "He's not what I expected, Layla. I know what the headlines say, I know what the photograph means, but the man who sat in his apartment bleeding in the dark and let a stranger make him eggs, that man is real too, and I don't know what to do with both things being true at the same time." "Simone, Washington," Layla said. "You have been collecting strays since you were 7 years old. You brought home a 3-legged dog. You tutored the kid who had failed the same grade twice. You are constitutionally incapable of walking away from something that needs to be understood. Is that a problem?" "It is a personality trait," Layla said, "I love you. Be careful." She hung up. 3 floors down, Tae Yang stood at his window looking at the same city. He had not moved from that spot since he had walked her to the lobby and watched her disappear into the elevator. He had people trying to find out who had put the photograph in her pocket. He had ended his association with Park Do-yoon in a single phone call on the walk home. He had spent 15 years making decisions from a position of complete calculation. Every move, every alliance, every sacrifice plotted on a board he alone could see. Tonight, standing at his window, he made the first decision in 15 years that had nothing to do with strategy. He chose her. Not as a variable, not as a liability to be managed, not as the woman who had walked into the wrong apartment and created a complication he needed to resolve. Her. Simone Washington, who had grabbed a vase in the dark, made him eggs, told him about her grandmother, asked him questions no one had asked in over a decade, and slapped a man over morning coffee without spilling a drop. She had seen him, the actual him, not the version the city knew, not the name in the headlines, and she hadn't looked away. He reached for his phone. Subscribe right now, because what happens next is going to change everything, and you need to be here for it. Her phone rang at 11:47 p.m. She almost didn't answer. She was tired, and she had already processed more in one day than most people managed in a week, and she just wanted 5 minutes of silence before she fell asleep. But it was the hospital, and nurses always answer the hospital. Washington. She put the phone to her ear, already moving toward the desk where she kept her ID badge. Simone. It was Dr. Choi from the ICU, and something in his voice made her stop moving. She had known Dr. Choi for 8 months. He was steady, unshakable. She had never once heard him sound like this. "We have an emergency admission," he said. "GSW, critical. He's stable for now, but asking for you specifically, only you." A pause. "Simone. He says his name is Park Do-yoon. He says—" Dr. Choi hesitated. "He says you need to ask Tae Yang about the photograph, that there's a second one, and that whoever put the first in your pocket," another pause, longer this time, "is already inside this building." The room went very quiet. Simone looked at her phone. Then she looked at the door to her apartment. Then she looked at the text that had just arrived from Tae Yang. Sent 30 seconds ago. 3 words, "Don't open it." Her hand was on the door handle. On the other side, somewhere in the building, Seoul kept moving, loud, alive, relentless. And in the silence of her 8th-floor apartment, Simone Washington, who had walked into the wrong door once before and somehow ended up exactly where she was supposed to be, took one long, steady breath and made her choice. End of part 1. If this story has you hooked, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Part 2. Drops soon, and you are not ready for what Simone finds on the other side of that door.